Jake Morrison sat in his small apartment on Luna Station, staring out at the Earth below. 3 years had passed since the war ended. 3 years since he became the most famous man in human space. 3 years since he decided to disappear. The apartment was simple. 1 room, 1 bed, 1 kitchen. No pictures on the walls, no medals on display. Nothing to remind him of what he used to be. Jake Morrison, the war hero. Jake Morrison, the man who saved humanity. Jake Morrison, the monster. He spent his days working at the station's water treatment plant. It was quiet work. Nobody asked, no questions. The other workers knew who he was, but they left him alone. They could see something in his eyes that told them not to ask about the war. The door chime rang. Jake did not move. Very few people knew where he lived. Even fewer had permission to visit. The chime rang again. "Come in," Jake said without turning around. The door slid open. A woman in a blue diplomatic uniform stepped inside. Jake recognized her immediately. Ambassador Lisa Carter. They had worked together during the war. She was one of the few people he still trusted. "Hello, Jake," Lisa said. Her voice was careful, like she was talking to a wild animal. "Lisa." Jake finally turned around. "What brings the Earth's top diplomat to my little corner of nowhere?" Lisa looked around the bare apartment. Her face showed concern. "We need to talk." "No, we don't." Jake turned back to the window. "Whatever it is, find someone else." "It's not that simple." Lisa sat down on the only chair in the room. "This comes from the very top. President Clark himself." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The president can go to hell. I told him 3 years ago. I'm done. The Zephyrians have made a formal request." Lisa's words made Jake freeze. "Princess, Lyrelai wants to meet with you." For a long moment, Jake said nothing. Outside the window, Earth turned slowly in space. So beautiful. So peaceful now. No alien ships in orbit. No weapons pointed at the blue planet that held 8 billion human souls. "Why?" Jake asked. "She's been studying the war records. She wants answers about the final battle." Jake's hands began to shake. He put them behind his back so Lisa could not see. "Tell her I'm dead." "I tried that. She knows you're alive. She knows where you are." Lisa stood up and walked to the window. "Jake, she's threatening to recommend that her father review the peace treaty." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. The peace treaty was everything. Without it, the war would start again. Humanity might not survive a second war with the Zephyrian Empire. "What does she want to know?" Jake asked. "Everything. She wants to know about Kepler 442b. She wants to know why humanity's greatest war hero lives alone on a space station, working in a water plant." Lisa turned to face him. "She wants to know why you stayed away from all the celebrations." Jake closed his eyes. In his mind, he could still see the final battle, the alien ships burning in space. The silence that followed, the moment when he realized what he had become. "I can't," Jake whispered. "You have to." Lisa's voice was firm now. "Jake, you saved us all. You ended the war. Whatever happened out there, we're alive because of you. You don't understand." Jake opened his eyes. They were full of pain. "You think I'm a hero, but heroes don't do what I did." "Then what are you?" Jake was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I'm the man who looked into the abyss and decided to jump in. I'm the man who chose to become a monster so that humanity could remain human." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. In all the years she had known Jake, she had never heard him talk like this. "What happened out there? If I tell the princess the truth, she'll understand why I live here alone. But she might also understand why her people should be very, very afraid of us." Jake turned back to the window. "Sometimes the truth is more dangerous than lies. Will you do it?" Jake thought about the 8 billion people on Earth. He thought about the human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems. He thought about children who would grow up in peace because of what he had done, and he thought about what he had sacrificed to give them that chance. When does she want to meet? 1 week, at Centauri Station. Neutral ground. Jake nodded. Smart. She doesn't want to meet me in human space. Jake, what aren't you telling? Me? What really happened at Kepler 442b? Jake Morrison looked at his reflection in the window. For just a moment, he saw not the tired man he had become, but the soldier he used to be. The soldier who had made an impossible choice in the darkness of space. Lisa, there are things that happened during that battle that I've never told anyone, not the president, not the military command, not even myself some days. He turned to face her. If I tell the princess the truth, everything changes. The way they see us, the way we see ourselves. Is the truth that bad? Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he walked to a small safe hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. From it, he pulled out a single data chip. The chip was black, with red warning symbols. This contains the full record of what we did to win the war, Jake said. Every decision, every action, every consequence. He held the chip up to the light. Do you know why I keep this? Lisa shook her head. To remind myself that monsters can sometimes do the right thing, and to remind myself that doing the right thing can make you a monster. Jake put the chip back in the safe. I'll meet with the princess, but Lisa, when this is over, you might wish I had stayed hidden. Lisa left soon after. Jake stood alone in his apartment looking out at Earth. In 1 week, he would have to face the daughter of the alien emperor. He would have to explain why. Humanity's greatest victory was also its greatest shame. Jake Morrison closed his eyes and prepared himself to become a monster once again. Centauri Station floated in space like a crystal flower. It was built by 5 different alien species working together. Each section was designed for different types of beings. The diplomatic quarter was the most beautiful part, with walls that changed color and rooms that could shift to match any environment. Jake Morrison walked through the station's corridors, wearing his old military uniform. He had not worn it in 3 years. It felt strange and heavy on his shoulders. The blue fabric was clean and pressed, but it could not hide the weight he carried inside. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked beside him, along with 2 other diplomats. They spoke quietly about protocol and proper behavior. Jake was not listening. His mind was focused on what was coming. Remember, Lisa said, Princess Lyrelei is young, but she speaks for her father. Show respect, but don't appear weak. I know how to talk to aliens, Jake replied. His voice was calm, but his hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. When Jake Morrison was in soldier mode, nothing could shake him. They reached the meeting chamber. The doors were tall and made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow from within. 2 Zephyrian guards stood on either side. They were tall, with silver skin and eyes that glowed like stars. They wore armor that looked like flowing water. The doors opened without sound. Inside, the chamber was magnificent. The walls showed images of space with stars moving slowly across them. The floor was smooth and warm. In the center of the room was a platform where 2 chairs faced each other. Princess Lyrelei stood waiting. She was young for a Zephyrian, maybe 200 years old. Her silver skin gleamed in the soft light. Her hair was long and white, flowing like liquid mercury. Her eyes were the deep blue of a nebula. But Jake was not fooled by her beauty. He could see the intelligence in her gaze. This was not some spoiled royal. This was a warrior princess who had studied humanity and found them wanting. Captain Morrison, the princess said. Her voice was musical, but there was steel underneath. Thank you for coming. Your Highness. Jake bowed slightly. Though I should mention, I'm not a captain anymore, I'm nobody now. Are you? The princess gestured to the chairs. Please sit. They sat facing each other. The human diplomats took positions along the wall. Zephyrian advisors did the same on the other side. But Jake felt like he and the princess were alone in the room. I have been studying your species, Princess Lyrelei began. Your history fascinates me, You are such a young race, yet you have accomplished so much and destroyed so much. We do what we must to survive, Jake said. Yes. Survival. The princess leaned forward. That is what I want to discuss. You see, Captain Morrison, I have read every report about the war. I know about your victories. The siege of New Vancouver, where you held off our fleet for 6 months with just 3 ships. The defense of Europa Colony, where you saved 2 million civilians. The impossible victory at the Titan Nebula. Jake said nothing. He remembered those battles. The fear. The desperation. The choices that had to be made. You were brilliant, the princess continued. Tactical genius. My people's military academies now study your strategies. But there is something that puzzles me. What's that? Kepler 442b. The final battle. Our records show that we were winning. Our fleet was larger. Our technology was superior. Our warriors were trained from birth for combat. The princess's eyes narrowed. Yet somehow, we surrendered. Not just retreated. Surrendered completely. Why? Jake was quiet for a long moment. In his mind, he could see that distant planet, the red sun, the dark space filled with ships, the moment when everything changed. We got lucky, he said finally. Princess Lyrelei laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. Luck? Captain Morrison, I have studied human history. I know about your wars. World War I, where you killed millions in trenches filled with mud and blood. World War II, where you built weapons that could destroy entire cities. The Cold War, where you pointed enough nuclear weapons at yourselves to end all life on your planet. Jake felt a chill. The princess had done her homework. Your species, she continued, has a talent for war that frightens other races. When faced with extinction, humans do not simply fight harder. They become something else entirely, something that makes survival not just possible but inevitable. What are you saying? I am saying that what happened at Kepler 442b was not luck. It was not even military genius. It was something much more dangerous. The princess stood and walked to the wall showing the stars. I want to know what my people saw in that final battle that made them so afraid they begged for peace. Jake felt the weight of the data chip in his pocket. The complete record of humanity's darkest hour. The proof of what they had become when faced with extinction. Your Highness, Jake said carefully, some knowledge is too dangerous to share. More dangerous than ignorance? The princess turned back to him. Captain Morrison, my father signed a peace treaty because our military commanders told him that continuing the war would mean the complete destruction of our empire. Not defeat, destruction. What did you do to make them believe that? Jake stood up slowly. The human diplomats along the wall looked nervous. They could feel the tension in the room growing thicker. You want to know why I live alone on a space station? Jake asked. You want to know why I work in a water treatment plant instead of commanding fleets? You want to know why I stayed away from every celebration, every ceremony, every medal presentation? Yes. Jake looked into the princess's glowing eyes. Because heroes don't win wars, Your Highness. Monsters do. And once you become a monster, even for the right reasons, you can never really go back to being human. The princess was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was quieter. What kind of monster? The kind that looks at an entire enemy fleet and doesn't see warriors or ships or even living beings. The kind that sees only a problem to be solved no matter what the cost. Jake's voice was steady, but there was pain in his eyes. The kind that makes choices no civilized being should ever have to make. I need to know what happened. No, you don't. Jake stepped closer to the princess. Trust me on this. You think you want the truth, but the truth will change everything. It will change how your people see humans. It will change how we see ourselves. Some doors should never be opened. Princess Lyrelei met his gaze. The door is already open, Captain Morrison. My people are afraid of yours and they don't even know why. That fear is poisoning the peace. If I don't understand what happened, the treaty my father signed might not survive. Jake realized she was right. The peace was fragile because it was built on fear and ignorance. But would it be stronger if it was built on truth? Or would the truth destroy everything they had fought to achieve? If I tell you, Jake said slowly, there's no going back. Once you know what we're capable of, you can never unknow it. I understand. Jake looked around the room. At the human diplomats who had no idea what they were asking for. At the Zephyrian advisors who thought they were simply witnessing a military debriefing. At the princess who believed that truth was always better than lies. Very well, Jake said. But we're going to need privacy. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels of human government. Your advisors will need to leave. The princess nodded to her people. They left reluctantly. The human diplomats did the same, though Lisa Carter gave Jake a worried look before the doors closed. Now they were alone. Just a human monster and an alien princess, about to discuss the day that humanity showed its true face to the galaxy. Tell me, Princess Lyrelei said. Jake Morrison took a deep breath and began to speak the truth that had haunted him for 3 years. Jake Morrison sat back down and closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Princess Lyrelei saw something different in his face. The tired man was gone. In his place was the soldier who had ended a war. You want to know what happened? At Kepler 442b, Jake said. But to understand that, you need to know how desperate we were, how close humanity came to extinction. The princess remained silent, listening. 3 months before the final battle, your fleets had reached Earth's solar system. Mars was gone. Europa was evacuated. Titan was burning. Your ships surrounded, Earth like a net getting tighter every day. Jake's voice was steady, but his hands gripped the arms of his chair. We had maybe 2 weeks before your people would start bombing our homeworld. Our military doctrine was to defeat you, not destroy. You, the princess said. Jake laughed bitterly. Defeat and destruction look the same when you're losing. Your people might not have meant to wipe us out, but that's what would have happened. Earth would have surrendered and humanity would have become slaves in our own solar system. So you decided to make a last stand at Kepler 442b. No, Jake shook his head. We decided to become something else entirely, something your people had never faced before. Jake stood up and walked to the wall showing the stars. Do you know how many species have tried to conquer Earth, Princess? The war histories mention several conflicts. 12. In the 300 years since we reached the stars, 12 different alien species have decided that humanity needed to be conquered, enslaved, or eliminated. Jake turned back to her. Do you know how many of those species still exist? Princess Lyrelei felt a chill run down her spine. How many? None. The word hung in the air like poison. The princess stared at Jake, trying to understand what he was saying. That's impossible, she whispered. 12 entire species? The first was the Crithari. They attacked our colony ships. We hunted them down over 50 years and eliminated every single one of them. The second was the Bloodfang Empire. They enslaved human colonies for 20 years before we broke free. It took us another 30 years to track down their homeworlds and burn them all. Jake began pacing around the room. The Vorthak thought humans were good for eating. We made sure they never ate anything again. The Crystal Minds believed organic life was an error to be corrected. We corrected them instead. Should I continue? Stop. Princess Lyrelei's voice was barely audible. You're talking about genocide. I'm talking about survival. Jake's voice was hard now. Every single one of those species made the same mistake your people did. They assumed that because humans seemed soft, because we value life and peace and art, that we wouldn't fight back. With everything we had. But total extinction? Of entire civilizations? Jake stopped pacing and looked directly at her. Princess, let me explain something about humanity that your people never understood. We are not peaceful because we cannot fight. We are peaceful because we know exactly what we become when we do fight. He walked back to his chair but did not sit down. When humanity is threatened with extinction, we don't just fight harder. We don't just get more desperate. We become something that makes other species glad we usually choose peace. What do you become? Systematic, efficient, complete. Jake's words came out like hammer blows. We study our enemies until we know them better than they know themselves. We learn their weaknesses, their fears, their histories, and then we use all of that knowledge to end them forever. Princess Lirelai was beginning to understand why her people's military commanders had been so afraid. You're saying that at Kepler 442b, humanity showed this side of itself to our forces? Not quite. Jake finally sat down again. At Kepler 442b, we showed your people what we were preparing to become, and it terrified them so much that they surrendered before we had to go all the way. I don't understand. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out the black data chip. This contains the complete records of the Prometheus project. Are you familiar with that name? No. Dr. Helen Ross led the project. Brilliant woman. She specialized in studying alien psychology and biology. When it became clear that we were going to lose the war through conventional fighting, the human government gave her unlimited resources to find another way. Jake held up the chip. Dr. Ross and her team developed 3 different weapons, 3 different ways to end the war. Each one was designed to exploit different aspects of Zephyrian psychology and biology. Weapons of mass destruction? Worse, weapons of mass understanding. Jake's smile was cold. The first weapon was a computer virus that could take control of your ship's navigation systems, not destroy them, just disable them. Your people would be stranded in space, helpless but alive. That doesn't sound so terrible. The second weapon was biological, a virus that would make your people sick but not kill them. They would be too weak to fight but would recover in time. Again, victory without genocide. Princess Lirelai waited. And the third weapon? Jake was quiet for a long moment. The third weapon was psychological, a way to transmit information directly into the minds of your military commanders, to show them exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. What kind of information? Everything. Our complete military history. Every war we had ever fought, every strategy we had ever used, every enemy we had ever faced. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. And every enemy we had ever eliminated. The princess felt her blood turn cold. You showed them the fate of the other 12 species. We showed them much more than that. We showed them the Battle of Stalingrad, where humans fought in a frozen city until 2 million people were dead. We showed them Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where we ended a war by turning cities into shadows. We showed them the trenches of World War I, where we sent millions of our own people to die in mud and poison gas. Jake stood up again, his voice getting stronger. We showed them every single moment in human history when we chose survival over mercy, when we chose victory over honor, when we chose to become monsters rather than victims. And they surrendered? They didn't just surrender. They begged us to stop. Jake's voice was full of pain now. Your military commanders saw what we had done to the 12 species that came before you. They saw what we were preparing to do to your people, and they realized that the only way to save the Zephyrian Empire was to end the war immediately. Princess Lirelai was shaking. How many of your people know about this? 7. The president, 3 generals, Dr. Ross, me, and now you. Jake sat back down. Everyone else believes we won through superior tactics and lucky breaks. They believe I'm a hero who saved humanity through brilliant strategy. But you know the truth. I know that we didn't win the war, Princess. We convinced your people that continuing the war would result in their complete extinction, not because we were stronger or smarter, but because we were willing to become something that no civilized species should ever have to face. The room was silent for a long time. Princess Lirelai stared at the floor, trying to process what she had learned. Jake Morrison sat quietly, waiting for her response. Finally, she looked up. Is this why you live alone? Why you refuse honors and celebrations? Partly. Jake's voice was tired again. It's hard to celebrate saving humanity when you know what you had to threaten to become in order to do it. But you saved billions of lives. Both human and Zephyrian. Did I? Or did I just delay the inevitable? Jake met her eyes. Princess, your people surrendered because they were afraid of what we might do. But fear fades. Eventually, your people might decide that humans were bluffing. They might decide to test us again. And if they do? Jake Morrison looked at the alien princess and spoke the words that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Then they'll discover that we weren't bluffing at all. Princess Lyrelei stared at Jake Morrison for a long time. The chamber around them seemed to grow colder. The moving stars on the walls slowed down, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. You're telling me, she said slowly, that humanity convinced my people to surrender by showing them what you had done to other species. But you still haven't told me what actually happened at Kepler 442b. Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out the data chip again and held it up to the light. Princess, what I'm about to tell you will change everything. Not just between our species, but inside your own mind. Are you sure you want to know? I have to know. Jake inserted the chip into a small reader built into his chair. The wall opposite them began to glow, showing images and data. These are the complete records of the final battle. Everything we did. Everything we were prepared to do. The first image showed the space around Kepler 442b. Two massive fleets faced each other among the stars. The Zephyrian fleet was larger, their ships gleaming like silver daggers. The human fleet looked small and desperate. Your people were right. To be confident, Jake said. You outnumbered us 3-1. Your ships were faster and stronger, your weapons were more advanced. By every measure that mattered, we should have lost. But you didn't. No, we didn't. Jake touched a control and the image changed. This is Admiral Pete Collins, who commanded our fleet. Good man, honorable soldier. He was prepared to fight to the last ship and go down with honor. The image showed a gray-haired man in a blue uniform standing on the bridge of his flagship. His face was grim but determined. But I wasn't in charge of the fleet, Jake continued. I was in charge of special operations, and Dr. Helen Ross had given me 3 options to end the war. The 3 weapons you mentioned? Yes. But here's what I didn't tell you before. Jake's voice became very quiet. The original plan was to use only one of them. The computer virus, the biological weapon, or the psychological transmission. Dr. Ross believed that any one of them would be enough to force a surrender. Princess Lyrelei felt her stomach tighten. What did you do? Jake looked at her with eyes full of pain. I used all 3 at once. The wall display changed again, showing technical readouts and battle data. The computer virus went first. It spread through your fleet in minutes, taking control of navigation systems on over 60% of your ships. They couldn't move, couldn't retreat, couldn't do anything but float helplessly in space. That would have been enough to ensure victory. It should have been. But I was thinking about Earth, about the alien fleets that were still surrounding our homeworld, about the fact that even if we won this battle, your people might send more ships, bigger fleets, better weapons. Jake's hands were shaking again. So I activated the biological weapon too. The display showed microscopic images of a virus spreading through Zephyrian ship systems. It was designed to be non-lethal. Your people would get sick, but they would recover. The combination of disabled ships and sick crews would make resistance impossible. 2 weapons, the princess whispered. You used 2 weapons when one would have worked. And then I activated the 3rd weapon. Jake's voice was barely audible now. The psychological transmission. The one that would show your commanders exactly what humanity was capable of. Why? Why use all 3 when you were already winning? Jake stood up and walked to the display. The images now showed Zephyrian ships drifting helplessly in space, their crews too sick to fight. Because I wanted to make sure this was the last war humanity would ever have to fight. I don't understand. Princess, 12 alien species had tried to conquer or destroy humanity. 12 times we had been forced to become monsters to survive. I was tired of it. Tired of humans having to choose between our principles and our lives. Jake turned back to her. So I decided to send a message to every species in the galaxy. The display changed one final time. It showed the moment when the psychological weapon activated. Across the Zephyrian fleet, every commander, every officer, every tactical expert suddenly experienced the complete military history of humanity. They saw Roman legions conquering Europe through discipline and brutality. They saw Mongol armies sweeping across Asia, leaving no enemies alive. They saw the trenches of World War I, where humans sent millions of their own people to die rather than surrender an inch of ground. They saw the firebombing of Dresden, where an entire city was burned to ash in a single night. They saw the atomic bombs that ended World War II, weapons so terrible that humanity used them on itself rather than accept defeat. They saw the Cold War, where humans built enough nuclear weapons to destroy their own planet rather than live under foreign rule. But that wasn't the worst part, Jake said. The psychological weapon didn't just show them human wars against other humans. It showed them what we had done to alien species that threatened us. The display now showed the complete records of humanity's encounters with other alien races. The systematic hunting of the Crithari, the burning of the Bloodfang worlds, the complete elimination of the Vorthak species, 12 different alien civilizations, all reduced to nothing because they had threatened humanity. Your commanders didn't just see our history, Jake continued. They experienced it. For a few minutes they felt what it was like to be human. They felt our capacity for violence, our determination to survive, our willingness to do anything necessary to protect our own. Princess Lyrelei was crying now, though she didn't realize it. Her silver tears fell like drops of starlight. They felt what it was like to be a species that would rather destroy everything than be destroyed. Yes, and in that moment, they understood what would happen if the war continued. Jake sat back down. They saw that humanity wouldn't just fight back against your invasion. We would hunt down every single Zephyrian in the galaxy. We would track your people to their homeworlds, to their colonies, to their last hiding places among the stars. And we would end your species the same way we had ended the other 12. But you didn't do that. You accepted our surrender because your people were smart enough to surrender. Jake's voice was cold now. They realized that continuing the war would mean the complete extinction of the Zephyrian Empire. Not defeat, not conquest, total extinction. The princess was shaking. How long did it take for them to surrender after the psychological weapon activated? 17 minutes. 17 minutes. The number hung in the air between them like a death sentence. In 17 minutes, the proud Zephyrian Empire had gone from confident victory to begging for peace. They contacted Admiral Collins directly. Jake continued. No diplomatic channels, no formal negotiations, just a simple message. We surrender. Please make it stop. Make what stop? The transmission was designed to be temporary, but your commanders thought it would last forever. They thought they would have to live with those memories, those experiences, for the rest of their lives. Jake almost smiled. The fear of becoming human was so terrible that they were willing to do anything to make it end. Princess Lyrelei buried her face in her hands. This is why my father signed the peace treaty so quickly. Why our military advisors recommended immediate cooperation with humanity. They weren't just afraid of your weapons, they were afraid of your minds. They were afraid of what we become when we have no choice. Jake retrieved the data chip and put it back in his pocket. Your people saw that humans don't just fight to win, Princess. We fight to make sure we never have to fight again. And if the peace breaks down? Jake Morrison looked at the alien princess with eyes that had seen too much. Then your people will discover that the weapons we used at Kepler 442b were just the beginning. They were the ones we were willing to use while we still had other options. What do you mean? I mean that Dr. Ross didn't just develop 3 weapons, Princess. She developed 17 different ways to end alien threats to humanity. We only used the 3 mildest ones. The chamber fell silent. Princess Lyrelei realized that she was not just talking to a war hero or even a monster. She was talking to a human being who had looked into the darkest corners of his species' soul and found weapons there that could end civilizations. Now, do you understand why I live alone? Jake asked. Why I stayed away from the celebrations. Why I work in a water treatment plant instead of commanding fleets? The princess nodded slowly. Because you know what humanity is capable of, and you know that someone has to remember the cost of survival. Someone has to carry the weight, Jake agreed. Someone has to make sure that we never forget what we became, even if it was necessary. Princess Lyrelei looked at this human who had saved both their species through an act of controlled monstrosity. What happens now? Jake Morrison stood up and walked toward the door. Now you go back to your father and tell him that the peace treaty is the most important document in galactic history. Because the alternative isn't just war, Princess. It's the end of everything your people have ever built. As he reached the doctor, Jake turned back one last time. And Princess, tell your father that Jake Morrison says hello. He'll understand what that means. The door closed behind him, leaving Princess Lyrelei alone with the terrible knowledge of what humanity truly was beneath their peaceful surface. Princess Lyrelei sat alone in the chamber for a long time after Jake Morrison left. The moving stars on the walls seemed to mock her now. All those distant suns, all those worlds where life flourished, not knowing how close they had come to witnessing the complete extinction of an entire galactic empire. The door chimed. "Enter," she called. Admiral Pete Collins walked in. He was the same gray-haired man she had seen in the battle records, but older now. His face was lined with years of carrying secrets. "Your Highness," he said with a slight bow, "Captain Morrison asked me to speak with you. He's not a captain anymore. He'll always be a captain to me." Collins sat down in the chair Jake had used. "He saved us all. Every human being alive today owes their life to what he did at Kepler 442b. Even knowing what he became to do it, Collins was quiet for a moment. Especially knowing that. He looked at the princess with steady eyes. "Your Highness, may I ask you a question?" "Of course. Do you have children?" Princess Lyrelei was surprised by the question. "I have a younger brother, Prince Kai. He's only 50 years old." "And you love him?" "Of course I do. Would you kill to protect him?" The princess hesitated. "If I had to, yes." "Would you lie to protect him? Steal? Betray your own principles?" Yes. I suppose I would." Collins leaned forward. "Would you become a monster to save his life?" Princess Lyrelei understood where this was going. "You're saying that Jake Morrison had 8 billion humans to protect?" "I'm saying that Jake Morrison looked at two choices. He could remain a good man and watch humanity die, or he could become something terrible and save us all." Collins's voice was heavy with old pain. "He chose to save us, and he's been paying the price ever since. But he used all 3 weapons. He went beyond what was necessary." "Did he?" Collins stood up and walked to the display wall. "Your Highness, let me tell you something that's not in any official record. Something that Jake Morrison has never told anyone, not even the president." The princess waited. "Before the battle, Jake Morrison received intelligence that your people were preparing something called the Final Protocol. Do you know what that was?" Princess Lyrelei felt her blood turn cold. "How do you know about that?" "So it was real." Collins turned back to her. "Jake's sources suggested that if your people lost at Kepler 442b, your emperor was prepared to destroy every human world, simultaneously. Not invasion, not conquest, complete annihilation. The Final Protocol was a contingency plan. If our empire faced extinction, we would take our enemies with us." The princess's voice was barely a whisper. "My father never intended to use it. But Jake Morrison didn't know that. As far as he knew, losing the battle meant the immediate death of every human being in the galaxy." Collins sat back down. "So when he activated all 3 weapons, he wasn't just trying to win the war. He was trying to end it so completely that your people would never even think about the Final Protocol." Princess Lyrelei buried her face in her hands. "He was trying to save both our species. He was trying to make sure that no one would ever have to make the choices he was making." Collins's voice softened. "Your Highness, Jake Morrison didn't Just sacrifice his honor to save humanity. He sacrificed his humanity to save both our peoples. The door chimed again. This time, Ambassador Lisa Carter entered. Her face was pale and drawn. "Princess," she said, "I need to ask you something important. What are you going to tell your father?" Princess Lyrelay looked up. "I don't know. Because whatever you decide, it's going to determine the future of both our species." Lisa sat down, across from the princess. "If you tell your father that humans are monsters who can't be trusted, the peace treaty dies. If you tell him we're weak and we're just bluffing, he might decide to test us. And if you tell him the complete truth, he'll be terrified," the princess finished. "Fear can preserve peace," Admiral Collins said, "but it can also destroy it. Fear makes people do desperate things." Princess Lyrelay stood up and walked to the wall display. She touched a control and the images changed to show Centauri Station floating peacefully in space. Human and Zephyrian ships docked side by side, diplomats from both species working together. "In the 3 years since the war ended," she said, "our peoples have built this. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation. My youngest cousin is learning to speak human languages. Human children are studying Zephyrian art. All built on a foundation of ignorance," Lisa said quietly. "No." The princess turned back to them. "Built on a foundation of choice." "I don't understand." Jake Morrison made a choice at Kepler 442b. He chose to become something terrible to save both our peoples. But after the war, he made another choice. Princess Lyrelay walked back to her chair. He chose to disappear, to live quietly, to let the peace grow without his shadow hanging over it. Admiral Collins nodded slowly. He chose to be the monster in the dark, so that everyone else could live in the light. And now I have to make a choice. The princess sat down. I can tell my father the truth and let fear rule our relationship with humanity. I can lie and pretend that humans are just another peaceful species. Or, Lisa asked. Or I can tell him that humanity is exactly what they appear to be. A species that values peace so much that they're willing to do terrible things to preserve it. Princess Lyrelay looked at both humans. A species that produces people like Jake Morrison, people who will sacrifice everything, including their own souls, to protect what they love. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then Admiral Collins spoke. "And what will you recommend about the peace treaty?" "I will recommend that it becomes permanent. Not just a treaty, but an alliance." The princess's voice was strong now. "Because any species capable of producing Jake Morrison is a species we want as friends, not enemies." Lisa Carter felt relief wash over her. "You're not afraid of us?" "I'm terrified of you," Princess Lyrelay said honestly. "But I'm also amazed by you. In my studies of human history, I've learned that your species has an incredible capacity for both creation and destruction. You build beautiful cities and terrible weapons. You write poetry and wage wars. You love deeply and fight fiercely." She stood up again. "But most importantly, you produce people who are willing to become monsters so that others don't have to. Jake Morrison saved billions of lives by sacrificing his own peace of mind. That's not the action of a monster. That's the action of a hero." Admiral Collins shook his head. "Jake would disagree with you." "I know. And that's exactly why he's a hero." Princess Lyrelay walked toward the door. "Heroes don't celebrate their victories when those victories come at a terrible cost. They carry the weight so that others can be free." As she reached the door, Lisa called out, "Princess, what will you tell Jake Morrison when you see him again, in Sicyon?" Lyrelay stopped and turned back. "I'll tell him thank you. I'll tell him that both our peoples are alive because of his sacrifice. And I'll tell him that he can stop carrying the weight alone now." "What do you mean?" "I mean that someone else needs to know the truth. Someone else needs to remember what happened and why it was necessary." The princess smiled sadly. "I'll tell him that he's not the only monster in the galaxy anymore. Now there's a Zephyrian princess who knows exactly what her people are capable of when pushed to the edge." She paused at the door. And I'll tell him that monsters who choose to protect life instead of destroying it aren't really monsters at all. They're guardians. Princess Lyralee left the chamber and walked through the corridors of Centauri Station. Around her, humans and Zephyrians worked together in peaceful cooperation. Children of both species played in the station's parks. Scientists shared discoveries. Artists collaborated on works that blended both cultures. All of it possible because one human being had been willing to look into the abyss and become what was necessary to save them all. As she boarded her ship to return to the Zephyrian Empire, Princess Lyralee composed her message to her father. It would not mention the complete truth about Kepler 442b. It would not describe the 17 weapons that humanity had developed. It would not explain the psychological transmission that had broken her people's will to fight. Instead, it would simply say that humanity was a species to be respected, allied with, and never ever threatened again. It would recommend that the peace treaty become the foundation for a friendship that would last for generations. And somewhere on Luna Station, Jake Morrison would continue his quiet work, carrying his burden in solitude, never knowing that an alien princess had decided to share the weight of protecting the peace he had created. The universe continued to turn. Stars burned in the darkness, and two species that had nearly destroyed each other instead built something beautiful together, guarded by the memory of what they could become if they ever forgot the value of peace. Princess Lyralee's ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying with it the decision that would shape the future of both their peoples. Behind her, Centauri Station floated peacefully among the stars, a symbol of what was possible when monsters chose to become guardians instead. The reply that had silenced her was not Jake Morrison's words about weapons or war. It was his quiet acceptance of the burden he carried and his unwillingness to let that burden destroy the peace he had created. In the end, that was the most human thing of all.